welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I am Richard Carlton, creator of FMTrain.tv, where I get the privilege and pleasure of coming on this show frequently and talking with you. Every day at 1 o'clock, we're broadcasting. Some days it's me, some days it's other people who are much more talented than me, educating you or hearing what you have to say about the awesome things that you're doing with the FileMaker platform. So the FileMaker platform is this wonderful bit of software created by Claris International. They're called Claris International now. For those you missed the memo that they changed their name, I know about half the world is unaware that they changed their name. So if you go to claris.com, I believe this works. The FileMaker platform is great for increasing your return on investment with your information technology dollar. If you want to build a system that keeps track of what your organization needs to do, the important things to your organization, this platform is really quite good at it. So let's talk about the upcoming broadcast schedule. So who are we and why should you care, right? It's always what I always ask people about that. If you go to fmtrain.tv and then you hit the live training tab right here, you can see today is going to be the network is full. A developer's guide to managing non-technical people in a technical world, right? So that will be, we're going to have fun with this. If you have stories or relevant thoughts along the way, feel free to comment on us. Let us know. So we have Leland Long here with us today. So we have lots of excitement and announcements on that end of things. So first off, FMTrain.tv, we broadcast in high definition all these channels. Keep in mind, if you're on YouTube or Twitch and you type a comment, by the time you see the video and type the comment, about 90 seconds will have elapsed. So just make sure that you provide a little bit of, like if I ask a question, I'm not going to wait 90 seconds for you to respond. So feel free to put a little bit more information there. If you're on Discord, it's about a half a second delay. You see this stuff in real time. While I'm having fun with the title of this conversation is really about managing FileMaker performance or being aware of how to potentially measure it if it's not performing well, right? And so let me bring in Leland here real quick. Now, you notice Leland's over here. So Leland Long is one of the top people in the FileMaker community in terms of development in general, but JavaScript specifically. So he put on our 3-week JavaScript training extravaganza. That material is all right here. If you come over here, you can press the button there. You're going to get a link where you can go and visit the pages. I can pop that in there real quick. And so you can see that normally it comes with a link. You get the first 2 weeks totally free. And then if you want a deeper dive of React Native, which is basically building apps on iOS and Android with JavaScript and having them executable and then putting those into the Google Store or the Apple Store for those mobile devices, that's kind of what this was about over here. It's a pretty accelerated training session. It was supposed to be 5 days. It was so much content that we shoved it into 6 days, just barely. So anyway, so what Leland decided to do is that he wants to come back and talk about some other basic JavaScript type things to help the community. He's really trying to help you folks become better at what you're doing. So the running thought, and I was going to talk to Leland about this, but since I don't get to talk to him too much, we just kind of pass each other ships in the night. I was thinking about taking his JavaScript pages and continuing to enhance them, providing, I guess, some better descriptions here. So we would have different free sections in here on the beginning and basics and stuff like that. So for example, yesterday Nick was talking about Jason, not Jason Smith, your next door neighbor, but JSON, which is this basically a way of formatting the text, the JavaScript object notation, right? And so the idea is that's a topic that's coming up fairly soon. So Leland is going to be providing a bunch about, the idea is about 1 day a week. Now we're still getting him into the schedule, but 1 day a week will be JavaScript specific on the 1 o'clock live stream on the FileMaker FMTV. Pretty cool. So Leland, that is awesome. I know a lot of people are thinking that is great besides myself. So Leland, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah, so if you want to briefly talk about, I mean, you said, did I say that I represent that accurately? That the idea is to, come on, kind of once a week or some sort of schedule like that and, provide additional JavaScript training for the community. I think that's a high value thing that you're doing.
Yes, it is. And the only thing that I would add as an addendum to that is that a lot of the proposed content that I have been exploring. Of course, nothing's set in stone yet. You and I can work out the particulars later. But some of these topics that I've kind of picked build on top of each other, and some of it is JavaScript related, and some of it is not. So, for instance, there's a few JavaScript things that I wouldn't mind covering and going over, but it really could use some exploration of some advanced topics before that that are not JavaScript related, that are just FileMaker related, or technology that FileMaker uses in general. So an example, I'll just throw a few examples out there. One of the big things that we use JavaScript for, especially for myself, in the commercial world, is querying data from other data sources using what everybody knows as APIs, application programming interfaces. And when you do that nowadays, well, in the old days, you would typically get back XML. Even FileMaker worked with the XML protocol when it dealt with sharing and receiving data from outside sources. But JSON has become kind of the new standard, right? So when you Google when you use Google's API, when you use other vendors' APIs that you might work with in the commercial world, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, you can probably expect to get JSON back. And so because of that, there's some things that we can start to learn when it comes to even using JSON queries inside FileMaker itself to talk to FileMaker itself, or talking to another FileMaker server. So there's a few different things that we can kind of explore and get into a little bit that we might deviate a little bit from the JavaScript world and eventually get back to it. So
Yeah, well, those I would consider those supporting elements, the supporting cast to your character, right? So
yeah,
any of that kind of stuff is fair game. Real quick, so today's conversation, let's talk about that. So I'm going to pivot today's conversation into this conversation about latency. So the idea with today's what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of this is in my once again, this is our FileMaker, my FileMaker Pro, or our Pro platform related training course. It's a paid course. So real quick, those of you wondering how you support the channel, while this seems to be free for you, I can assure you that there's a lot of money that goes into putting all this together. So I recommend that you support Leland, purchase his training. If you want to support us or do both, which is even better, check out if you go to fmtrain.tv, check out the bundles button right here. So you have the live training button, the bundles button. Purchase one of the bundles, keeps the lights on. So what you're seeing right now is a little bit of the material we've already shot that's in the paid training course. It's in it's actually in all 3 of these. It's under the performance tuning and improvement section. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through this just a little bit. So as a reminder, these are our profiles or personas that we talk about. Claris gave these personas different names, like Susan and Jack and Fred and other names like that. So for Claris executives to learn about what their customers are and where the problems they had. And they did some really neat charts on that. I never got copies of the charts because I thought they're really great, but I'm sure Claris considers them proprietary. But they're really kind of specific to the world of FileMaker. It's like, these are the problems that a beginner has. Then you have this challenge of getting it on the server. Then you have a performance. So it's like this high and low kind of ebb and flow thing I thought was really great. Well, I simplified that down a little bit. So we have beginning developers, intermediate developers, senior developers. Over here, sometimes you'll see a fourth one I do, which is your business process owner manager. Not necessarily a technical person, and it's kind of the person that in some ways we're talking about today. They maybe know and like FileMaker, or maybe they hate FileMaker. The deal is that they have other people working for them. So Leland is an in-house developer. So Leland is very much, if you see Senior Ninja, he's to the right of that over here on the edge of the screen, like beyond like ultra double triple secret ninja developer. Then he has a boss, I'm sure that's over here, he or she, or maybe mini bosses. They own the process. They want to see the organization run smoothly, but they're not going to get into the application and I'm going to build a new layout. I'm going to code a layout. I'm going to fix that JavaScript. That's not their deal, right? So today's conversation is to address the beginning developers and to a degree the intermediate developers who maybe haven't been paying attention to this and understand what these managers are going to do with you. So let's talk about this briefly. Brand new developer is this person here. I'm going to simply talk about the idea that we get into this issue of moving data, right? So moving data between the FileMaker server and the client. When a beginning developer is involved, as you're building an application, you are shooting lots of data back and forth. And I'm going to define a term here real quick. So this is why I have the roll of toilet paper here. We have our very high-end budgetary prop department over here. So there we go, a little bit of that. So this is, I don't know if I can, if the folks can see me. Mark, can they see me over here a little bit? So this, so the little bits going back and forth on that network wire, right? If I come back over here and I run that backwards again over here, the little bits moving back and forth. So these are packets of information. They're going back and forth. So there's your side, you, the client, you send up a little block of data. It goes flying through the network. It runs to the server. The data will go back and forth. And frequently you'll send 5 or 10 packets one way, 5 or 10 packets will come back the other way. You go, well, what's a packet besides a little wad of toilet paper? A packet from a simplistic standpoint would be if I found like not that piece of paper. Do I have another one? A paragraph of text. And all it is from your standpoint, and packets are a technical thing, but at the end of the day, imagine a couple paragraphs of text that you write, like half a sheet of paper, single spaced, lined paper. That's a packet. All it is data. It's just text data. It literally is all it is, text data. And it moves across the internet. And when the packet reaches the other side goes, yes, I received that packet and have verified that it was received and it is intact. It wasn't scrambled or screwed up. And so when you load a FileMaker file, you open up the FileMaker file. FileMaker, for the most part, in a simplistic way of saying this, sends down a bunch of packets to you so you can load the layout. And then more packets come down that populate the data, right? So those packets zipping back and forth are a thing. The idea as a developer is that you want to minimize those packets. So if you remember, there are quite a few packets rolling over there. Here, what I'm trying to show you is that as an intermediate or senior level developer, you're trying to do things more efficiently, so you don't send as many packets whizzing back and forth. You're more thoughtful about how you do what you do, right? Because you're aware that certain techniques that you use in the FileMaker platform might result in quite a few packets going back and forth. And the equivalent technique, I mean, from the end user perspective, it looks the same, but how did you script it? Was it a calculation? Was it a custom function? Was it JSON? Who knows? JavaScript. Maybe it was less packets going forth. Well, the issue with packets comes down to a fundamental issue here. Is that
a little bit of trivia for you there. The packet size is approximately 16 bits, or probably 2 bytes.
Well,
So
I've noticed
really
that packets,
small packets.
aren't they changing over time? Don't they seem to get bigger over time as packets are being resized and made larger, or are they still universally the same?
That I don't know, but it's interesting just to note how tiny those packets are. So you can imagine loading a web page that's 10 meg in size, how many packets that is back and forth to get the entire thing loaded. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's important. So just think of like a paragraph of text whizzing back and forth, and the more data you need to display, like as you imagine, you have a high resolution picture of your favorite dog, and you're mailing it to your best friend, like, look at my new puppy, right? And you have this high res picture. That's a lot of packets, okay, zipping back and forth, or mostly going one way probably, versus a page of text, which is very, compared to an image, fuel efficient. Shall we say, fuel efficient, less packets. So moving data seems bad, right? And there's this whole issue here. So why is moving data bad? Well, your office network is fast, the internet's slower. Why is that? Is these questions are coming up, right? And so those of you wondering about this is what we're talking about today. And that is the packets operate, let's start at the basics of physics, at the speed of light. They're electricity. They're operating at the speed of light. The problem is that it's not a beam of light from you to the server. The issue with the packets is that while fundamentally they operate across a copper wire, some sort of wire at the speed of light, there are these things called routers, network switches, things like that. So you have an Ethernet cable that goes from your computer, right? If I come back over here to here, so right here, if it was this simple, right here, I'm going to pause it right there. If it was this simple, It's the speed of light from there to there, 64 million miles an hour, I think is what the speed of light is. So, but in reality, it's you have a router at your home or your office, so there's a box. And then there's another box because your network is going to go up to your service provider, Comcast, Cable, Sprint, AT&T, Rogers Communications, Spectrum. Pick someone that you know, right? And then that will go across their network, across the globe or across the planet, and there'll be more boxes. So every time you hit a box, so if this is a freeway of data, imagine like buses, packets are like buses moving down the freeway. If the freeway was wide open at max speed, there'd never be a problem. These routers are like stoplights. Literally, they're a stoplight. And the data hits that thing and it comes to a stop. And then the light kind of thinks about, because it's moving traffic and directing traffic. And then you go from a red light to a green light and it keeps going. So what we have to do is it's not so much that at one point in the freeway we're going 60 kilometers an hour or 70 miles an hour or whatever speed we're going, or the speed of light, because we keep hitting these stoplights. What we want to do is we want to measure the time it takes for our bus to go from this part of the freeway on this computer all the way over here and essentially back. It's a round trip. That's called latency. It's the delay in getting there. So if I say, how fast am I going, when I'm going to get to, like I'm driving to Los Angeles from my current location up near the San Francisco Bay Area. Normally I would say, I'm going to go 80 miles an hour down the freeway, and the local law enforcement may write me a ticket because I'm going a little too fast, as my typical way of driving is. However, that doesn't take into account slow traffic, rush hour traffic, stoplights, potholes in the road, drunk drivers flipping upside down, accidents, things like that. So really, your speed is the time it takes you to go to Los Angeles, which might be 8 hours. And that's the way they measure network traffic. They don't measure it was going the speed of light. They measure actually the time it takes from you to start to get to where you want to go. It's called latency. It's measured in an ideal world in milliseconds. And so if I say I'm going to go to Los Angeles and I say, hey, I'm going to be going 55 miles an hour, that doesn't really help us. What I need to say is we're going to be going in 4 hours. The lower the number, the better. So I say, it's 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours, because I had like a Lamborghini, like a $500,000 car, or get a helicopter, fly down there, fly back. So suddenly you went from 8 hours of driving or 9 hours of driving, gas stops, the whole thing, get out, go to the bathroom, get a food, to 2 hours or an hour in a jet, right? Pretty cool. So all these things, that's how they measure network latency. So let's talk about this. So what can you expect in network latency? If I am here in my office, I'm in an office, and Leland works in an office somewhere when he's doing his development, or he might work at home, but let's just pretend he's in his office. He is on he's on a 5-story building, because like Claris Corp. Claris is 2-story building. They used to be a 3-story. That the downsized to like a square. We call it the box. The box is 2 stories. If you're on the 1st story and you're sending data to a destination that's on the 2nd story, it's probably not going to be on the same switch. You probably put a switch or some sort of router on each floor that routes the traffic back and forth. And so every time it hits that spot, it slows down. Typically, your slowdown across a 2-story building would be 1 millisecond, 1.5 milliseconds. If you're talking to someone on the same floor and they're just like a cubicle down around the corner over here, then maybe 0.5 millisecond. That's pretty damn fast. Okay. Now, the fastest can be is if you're not sending the data out in the network. You're using FileMaker Pro locally on your computer. That's the fastest possible. Then the only latency is the latency from your computer to save to the hard drive, which is why solid state drives are fast and the spinny drives are slow, right? So you go from spinny drives to solid state drives to a local network, which is on the same floor, 0.5 millisecond. Several floors, like on a 1st floor up to the 8th floor, 1.5 milliseconds. Then it goes out on the internet, it goes across town, 7 or 8 milliseconds. So I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area and I do a ping against other data centers around there, 6, 7, 8 milliseconds. That's pretty fast. I understand those numbers don't mean anything to you immediately, but trust me, 1/2 is almost like warp speed. 8 or 9 milliseconds is really really great speed. Margaret, if we have questions along the way, make sure you interrupt me, please. Okay.
I will.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
So we understand that the smaller the number, the better it is. So let's talk about the opposite end of the spectrum where it sucks. Claris, in their technical documentation, I saw it a couple of years ago, probably 2 years ago now, when we first covered this topic. Their recommendation is that your FileMaker server is not more than 150 milliseconds away. Well, what does that mean, right? Well, if I shoot data from the West Coast of the United States to the East Coast of the United States, I can frequently get 70 or 80 millisecond speed. It's a noticeable slowdown. It's a noticeable slowdown. I think a good database can still run at 80 or 90 milliseconds. We build FM starting point to operate up to 100 milliseconds well, okay? But we also don't put a lot of pictures and lots of containers updating and stuff like that flying around. You do those limitedly in a controlled environment. You don't put your background picture can't be, just giant pictures of Leland's face, as beautiful as he is and is stunningly handsome. You don't want, high res pictures of him bouncing around all over because it has to send that data down.
Do you have a terry cloth? I need to clean and rub my halo. That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, your halo. You got to polish that. That thing.
Got to keep it shiny.
So half a millisecond, 1 millisecond, 10 milliseconds is great. From one town to the next town, 30 milliseconds. When I have two offices, I love to see them 25 to 35 milliseconds. I love that. I love it a lot. I love it, love it, love it. And so the issue becomes one where that you start to slow down from here to East Coast to West Coast, 7 to 8 milliseconds. Remember, Claire says 150 or less. We were doing demos with Jesse Barnum and MirrorSync, and we had a 5-server replicated set, and the slowest path was between here and Mumbai, India, which is almost on the other side of the globe. 332 milliseconds was a standard speed there. Really slow, like miserably slow. And so that's where you want to have a local server there and a local server here, and the servers on their own schedule kind of synchronize and keep themselves up to date. Okay, that's not a FileMaker limitation. That's a limitation of the physics of the world. Okay, now you can make your FileMaker solution slower. It's a little fatter, too much sugar, too much carbohydrates, put on a couple pounds. It's not quite as nimble running through the network. So you can lighten it up and thin it up, but you can have a black and white blank layout in FileMaker and be accessing it from Mumbai, India, and see a noticeable delay as you click things and do things, and the packets are going, and the packets literally taking like a third of a second kind of thing to whiz all the way around and back. Now, that might not seem very, very slow to India. That being said, in the world of technology, it can impair you. It could be an impairment. It could make things very, very miserably slow. So what I want to do is, we're getting close to the Leland part of the conversation here. What I want to do is briefly pop open an app, if I have it here, and I think I bought this app.
Up on the screen while
he's... Go ahead and show your screen. Go ahead and show your screen, yeah. So the idea is that what we did is Leland built this, and he built it a while back, and I thought this was really great. And the goal was that you have people, so let me set this up. People come to you and go, hey, you're a really great FileMaker developer, and we think you're wonderful, but your stuff is slow. And they don't use the word stuff. They'll say something else. Your stuff is slow. And you're like, well, how is it slow? And they go, well, I don't know. It's just not fast. So we're talking about people who can't really describe what's going on. They just think that they're waiting. There's this like kind of pause everywhere you go. So the idea is that Leland built as a tool that allows you to press a button, and it tells you your FileMaker performance between known local locations. And so it's a little gas gauge action. So from Leland's location to the closest Apple server. Now, once again, Apple doesn't have one server. Google doesn't have one server. Microsoft doesn't have one server. Each of those companies have whole data centers that replicate. So when you go and say, go to google.com, you're going to the closest, what they call an edge location, or the closest data center. That way you don't have to go all the way around the world and talk to the server that might be in India, right? And so 14.8, that's pretty quick. 18.8 pretty quick, 14.4 pretty quick. Now, FileMaker server,
that's on an AWS instance in the Virginia region, I think.
okay, but where are you at? Fill us in where you're at geographically.
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay.
So either up to Virginia
So
or down to Atlanta, one or the other.
yeah, so the trick is how many miles is that about? Do we know? Do we have any idea what that looks like? Okay,
Atlanta's a 5-hour drive.
Well, there you go. Well, that's about what you need. It's about 5 hours then, right? So that is actually not too bad of a data center issue with that, if that makes sense. So the idea is that 5 hours. So there, like I'm in California. There's a Bay Area data center. There's also a lot of data centers in Oregon, for whatever reason. That seems to be a real popular location. And yeah. So the idea is that the lower the number, the better off you're going to be. I'm over here working on something else. So what we've done is we built this into the new starting point. Now you can download this FileMaker file today. In fact, Leland will talk about probably Pentagon forms and how you can go hunt it down and find it. But it's in FileMaker. We're building it as a starting point. So when people say, "Oh, I have a problem," you can just go into the preferences and hit the button. So Pentagon.fm. Oh, hey, is that you? Is that your Space Invaders up there?
FM Arcade, yep. And JavaScript 101. So here's the What's My Latency add-on that you're seeing right here. And it has a settings window so that you can pick things like number of servers to test, how many times to test each server, timeout, so that you don't have to wait forever if one of them's not responding. And then down here, you have a custom display lane. Can be anything you want to call it. And then after that is just the 4 URLs that you can put in anything you wish. And every time you hit the test again, it'll just run a new latency test based upon your settings. Pretty simple. And it's using some third-party JavaScript library to draw the little graphs. But the actual latency test itself is native FileMaker. It's actually built in, hidden away.
Yeah, walk us through that. Show us how to customize it for your own server, and then kind of how it works a little bit under the hood, a little deeper dive.
So pick a different company besides Apple and Google and Microsoft. Just pick one.
RC Consulting. Why not?
Oh, there you go. So what's the website for that?
It's RC Consulting. So it's RCC. Oh, yep, that's it. Keep going.
Just like so.
And that is a Linux server on Amazon on the West Coast, I think. So it would probably be 60 or 70 or 80. What I say from East Coast of the United States to West Coast, 60, 70, 80. There it is.
There it is. So that's how simple it was to change one of the servers to test. Down here at the bottom, I just happen to have a domain, a proper DNS domain name server that's up on Amazon that we use. So there's that server. You can plop in anything you wish. Now under the hood, if we're a little curious here, when it goes to test a server, let's see, where's the actual test going on? Here's where we run the tests. Perform JavaScript. That's probably the updating stuff. There's the first test of server. So here it is. Insert from URL is what we're doing to actually test the speed. And the secret is in the curl options right here. So we're asking for the curl options to return us the trace time in ASCII format. And we dump that into some sort of variable that we have access to so that we can look at the data that comes back, and then we can do some calculations on the trace, subtract the start time from the end time, and end up with a latency value. So yeah, it's all native FileMaker. From here on down is the actual work of determining what your latency is built into FileMaker. Matter of fact, I wonder, I'll take a look in the data viewer. I built this a long time ago. Let's see, there's the averages that we got back. Did I actually keep some of the trace information in here? I don't see it. I think this is just the HTML that comes back. But there was a place in there that I captured the actual trace values. But it looks like I might have turned that off in general. So yeah, this was the HTML that came back from each one of those servers. Interesting. Okay.
Very, very cool. So The idea, once again, is so fundamentals. One, you build as light as possible with your FileMaker solution. Two, you want your FileMaker server to be as close as possible to your users. And I guess if you can't do one or both of those items, or you can't do them very well, then you probably need to build a server that replicates itself. That's possible with 360 Works product. It's their mirror sync product. It works for offline users to use iPhones and iPads out or laptops out in the desert. You come back in, it resynchronizes. But what you do is you put mirror sync on two servers, and then those servers about every 20 seconds update. So you could edit a record, someone else could edit a record, and it synchronizes those edits every 20, 30 seconds. So everyone's staying pretty much up to date. It's pretty awesome. So this is really a big.
I think one of the initial thoughts that I had for this tool, as far as a common occurrence and how useful it can be, is especially as a consultant or an in-house developer, where you're doing your day-to-day routine stuff, and all of a sudden you start getting some calls from users. Hey, my internet's slow. My FileMaker solution is slow. So you tell them, okay, well, go to this particular screen and click a button, or go up to the script menu and select this particular utility script and click the test again button and tell me what the values are. If they come back with RCC around 80 milliseconds, Google around 10 to 20, Microsoft 10 to 20, FileMaker server 748, that should tell you a lot. That should tell you that right now your FileMaker server is bogged down with who knows what, multiple requests, something's going on. The rest of their internet is coming back at normal specs, but your FileMaker server specifically is higher than usual. That tells you something. But on the flip side, if they come back and see numbers like this, and FileMaker server comes back at 30 milliseconds or less, you can tell them that, well, I'll have to get back to you. I'll have to talk to some other users, because it sounds like it might be something specific to a certain case. It might not be your internet. It might just be your machine. Who knows what it is? But that tells you something different. Now, if you come back and RCC is over 800 milliseconds, Google comes in at 1200 milliseconds, Microsoft sits there and times out, and FileMaker server comes in at 800, that tells you that the user's entire internet connection from their machine is struggling. So it's their internet, because all the servers are coming back with high values. That's not normal behavior, but the fact that all four of them are high rather than just FileMaker server being high, that tells you it's not a FileMaker server issue. That tells you it's a general overall internet issue from where they are.
This is an excellent conversation, and it was perfect because it gave me a chance to pop up another tool. But the idea here is that, once again, in this case, say Leland is testing and he has this problem, but he's not a tech guy. His tech people say, hey, go here and tell us what you see. And so the tech people have already set this up. They know that this is a web server that's in AWS in the western part of the United States. Well, it's AWS West. This is a local edge location, probably local to Leland, so local. This one's also local, although probably a different data center, probably. And this one is a FileMaker server at AWS East somewhere. Okay, AWS. I'll just put an East in here. So once again, it doesn't. If the FileMaker server is high, it doesn't even really tell you that there's a problem with the FileMaker server. It could be a problem with Amazon somewhere with the hardware in that building, or the machine itself is failing, or FileMaker server has lost its mind and needs a restart, or whatever, right? But the trick is to compare these, know what the norms are, and suddenly, this one's out of whack, or maybe these are fine. This one's out of whack. If they're all out of whack, so let me share. I'm going to share my screen, but then I'm going to override you briefly. So I'm going to wave my hands here a little bit. It's another minor item, but it's kind of major, so you understand how this works. So, here is a pipe. Okay, here's a pipe, right? This is your internet. Everyone can see this, yes, right? Here's your internet, okay? And the more money you spend with your internet provider, the bigger pipe you get, right? Imagine this being water, okay? This is a very important analogy to help you understand. So we said everything goes at the speed of light, in so much as that there's not a bottleneck. So if you buy this pipe, and it doesn't matter, and you're sending email through it, and your kids are surfing a little bit, and you're getting some tweets and texts and stuff like that, maybe you've got a quarter or a third of water in here that's flowing through here. That water is roughly running at maximum possible speed, probably close to the speed of light until it hits a router, then it slows down. But you get that idea. Now, here's what happens. The water level gets higher, right? Say we have a big reservoir. Oh, I'm going to go to iTunes, right? Sometimes some people will stream a movie off of iTunes. So maybe the streaming service is taking half the pipe and there's a little bit left up here. And maybe your kids start streaming a movie or download a movie. And suddenly all the available simultaneous bandwidth, all the available pipe you're using. Well, just because it's full, you don't get extra pipe. They only sold you so much. They're not going to give you a bigger pipe because you're a nice person, right? Ken, the hot air balloon Ken. Oh, Ken's a nice guy. We love Ken. Let's give him a bigger pipe, right? So what happens is that you start to have a giant reservoir that starts filling up. And so your data needs or whatever are going in here first. And then as the pipe has space availability, it shoots the water through. And so what happens is suddenly the data hits here and it's stuck and it's hanging out. So what happens is that when someone says the internet's full, the internet might not be full, but their pipe might be. And so by them downloading a bunch of stuff, if they get this thing to saturation where you're 100% using the 100% available internet connection, or a lot of IT people call it the pipe, then you're going to go into a backlog waiting for your item to go through. And if it's in here, like for example, we said 12 milliseconds and 15 milliseconds, but if all of them are high numbers, the local network could be losing its mind. They might have to reset the router. The company might be having a problem, or you might have 5 people downloading and streaming videos at the same time, in which case the pipe is full, right? Back in the day, it was like my very first exposure to the internet, right? This is 1993. That's how far this goes back. And they had the networks back then were, imagine how much water you could put. Yeah, here we go. This little tiny wire, and if you suck on it really hard, you get a little bit of water through there. Straw would be, it's not even a straw is accurate. It's like tiny. We're talking 12K per second, okay? 12 kilobytes per second, not megabytes or megapixels, any of that. 12 and a half. And so what it was is that someone goes, so they were using FileMaker 2 on the local network, and someone showed me, hey, you can go on the internet and download this stuff. And so I'm like oh, there's a picture of a fighter jet, right? I'm like 21 years old. This is like the coolest shit ever. I can download this, I can download that, and I'm downloading stuff, and people come in the back and they're going, like, what do you guys, we're all taking a break. Why? Well, FileMaker is slow. That was my first exposure to it. They had a straw, and by me downloading a couple pictures in 1983, it destroyed their network. Back in those days, FileMaker didn't do containers with images and stuff in it. Well, no one really seriously did that, right? I think they had a field type called picture before it was called a container, and it was local, horrible performance. But all these people are milling around because they used a 12 kilobyte per second network, just moving like contact records around and students that they were helping. It's on the University of California. And of course, I promptly choked their network by downloading a picture of a F-15 fighter jet, which I thought was bad, right? Oh, I can't believe I can do that. That's the coolest thing ever. Promptly destroys the company. Now, to destroy people's network, people have to stream a couple movies simultaneously or something like that, and then it starts to go bad. But if you fill this pipe up, then all the other traffic goes into a holding pattern, and that jacks up that delay. So it's a really important idea to have in mind. So A, if you make your FileMaker file more fuel efficient, it needs less pipe. That's one thing. 2, don't let your kids download and watch YouTube or Disney Channel or whatever.
And depending upon your internet service provider, they can also share bandwidth within the neighborhood with your neighbors. So the more neighbors that all share the same type of Comcast internet, your entire, especially like an apartment complex, you can have bandwidth issues that has nothing to do with your house. It could be prime time. Everybody's coming home and watching streaming movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I have business at my home office. I'm at my home office here. We have business grade Comcast, supposed to be guaranteed at a certain level. The competitors like to say, hey, it's not really guaranteed, so you may not get what you think you're getting. The rub turns out to be is that I said, well, do you have fiber? So fiber, if this was the internet in 93 and this is the internet I have now, and I get a big fat fiber pipe, it's like a pipe around, I could almost crawl in it. And they're like, whoa, we haven't pulled fiber optics to your neighborhood yet, so just sorry. But
I'm
yeah,
spoiled.
the
I'm
bigger,
spoiled. I've had two houses with fiber now.
oh, I'm super jealous. That must be why you're smarter than me. Your internet goes
Oh,
faster.
okay. I'll take it.
Damn. All right. Well, yeah, David Angel says in 1993 he was using Novell 3.2 and IPX and SPX. Yeah, that used to be a test question. FileMaker supported IPX and SPX or IPX. Back FileMaker 2 and 3, Pro 2 and 3 supported back in those days. Crazy stuff. All right. So other questions about this topic. It's a great topic. We don't have to run the full hour. We kind of beat it to death. Leland, this is a great example of you don't need a full hour of content.
Right.
If we've killed it, it's good, right? So do people have any questions for us?
Muted. I haven't really seen any questions, to be honest. Are we all good?
Well, it's Friday, and listen, we got really smart people on the channel. If this had been 2 years ago, I mean, David Angel 2 years ago probably didn't even know how to use a mouse. So we've educated him a lot. I'm kidding, of course, over the last couple of years. But no, we keep raising the bar of knowledge here. So we need a lot of people watch the recording of this. This will be popular with that. So yeah, so there's a couple apps in here. I was on the Apple App Store, but you could get whatever, but like ping testers, right? And so one thing to keep in mind about packets whizzing back and forth, and most of you know this, but for those of you watching recording, is that just because you send a packet of data, I'm going to come back over here and make my face bigger. Just because you send a packet of data from point A up here across, it and you're like, well, it wasn't fast, but it did get there. Okay. The two things that will kill FileMaker performance are lost packets and slow packets. So if you start having delays of above 70 or 80, 90, 100 milliseconds, 150 super noticeable, 300, you're going to think that the internet quit working. That will cause problems. Also, packets, during the normal course of a network event, you'll have 0.5%, 1% of packets that just you shoot. It's like putting stuff in the mail. Like I put some boxes into the mail for my son when he was in the Army 3 years ago. Never seen again. Disappeared. Don't know where it went. Don't know what happened. It's gone. I mean, big boxes, right? So maybe someone else got them. The aliens abducted them, took it away. So you can send packets out, and the packets go, and they just out of existence, gone. And so that's why when you send a packet out, the other end goes, it sends you back a confirmation saying, yep, got the packet, confirmed it's this big, this size, and they send you a confirmation back to you that they got it. If you don't get the confirmation back after a short period of time, your computer goes, it's lost, send it again. So every time it has to resend a lost packet, it slows down the network. So you have two issues. So FileMaker gets really sensitive above about 5%, 10% packet loss, okay? And milliseconds, they get higher. So it's not just that they go slow, but you actually have some that never seen from again, right? Pretty cool. All right, so with that in mind, that's packet loss. So this is an app over here. Kind of hard to see it if I opened it over here. Let me see if I've got it going. Let me pop it open. I already owned it. I just had to install it on this computer. It's right here. It's called C. There it is. So I just put this in here real quick. We're doing a lot of network stuff already right now. I'm going to pick an arbitrary server. I think this is a Google server right here. So, and you can't, it's kind of hard to see, but the little red lines are where packets, it's not liking what it's saying, and it thinks the packets are dropping. Okay. Now it could be that Google is bouncing them, or we're doing a lot of live streaming and there's issues going on. Generally, this thing is more pessimistic than what I think you normally see. So whatever its threshold is of losing the packets, but the red line means it lost the packet. So it's trying to do some testing. It's having issues. Then I'll have other times where the network, it'll be perfectly blue. And the flow level right there you see is it'll start telling you your milliseconds, right? So milliseconds, it'll float. And then you have all, suddenly the internet's not working good. As a developer, you can pop open a packet tool and see a couple things. One, how many are being lost entirely? And then if they're not being lost, what the speed is of them, right? Very, very useful. David, do you use Windows? Are you a Windows person? And if so, what is your preferred? Do you use like a built-in packet and a command line, or how do you do your packet testing? Yeah, he's a Windows person. I'm sure, typing right now, telling us what he's using. I'm a Mac guy. Leland, you're a Mac guy. Do you ever use packet pinging on Windows? No? Yes? No?
It's been quite a while since I've done that. You can do that on the Mac terminal.
Okay, yeah. So he says IPFER is what he uses. IPFER or IPFER. But yeah, that's an app that he has, or it's built into the operating system, whatever it is. So yeah, so up here you're saying this thing is showing 40% loss of packets. I can assure you that's not the case, because if it was losing packets, you wouldn't be able to hear or see me with that. So anyway, so cool. Well, that's it for today. Oh, IPerf. Okay, well, if you spell it wrong, I don't know that, right? So anyway, so tomorrow's Saturday. There's no conversation tomorrow. What's Monday, Margaret? What are we doing Monday? What is
Monday is a continuation of Ken's file stuff, actually. Nick decided
hot air balloon Ken.
So
Hot air balloon Ken, yeah. So Nick is doing a total makeover. So he takes this database that's really probably ugly, and he starts scraping lipstick on it and cleaning it up and using a shovel and kind of organizing it. So Ken gets a free makeover, more makeover. You guys liking the makeover? Is that a good topic? If Nick comes back to me and wants to do more of that kind of stuff, I mean, obviously everyone would like Nick to rebuild their file. That's going to be a rare person that gets that privilege, right? I'm just saying. But are you learning things from that? Foxy Jack's typing, yeah. Yes to one or more of the sentences I just said. So yeah, cool. Leland, anything you have for people? Questions you have or thoughts or whatever? Because your stuff's coming up.
Kind of a wild off-topic question. Makeovers are a great learning tool. Learning a lot from makeover. Do more. People have to send us files for that. If you would like your file to get a free renovation on live TV, send it to support@rcconsulting.com.
All right. Be clear, we reject most of them. Nick is looking for the right level of screwed up file, and that's what he found with hot air balloon Ken's file. But yes.
There is a wildly unrelated question from David Angel. Since we've got like 6 minutes, I'm going to ask it.
I saw that earlier, really early on the thread. It was an Android question with WebViewer.
Creating a WebDirect page. I'm just going to read out loud real fast. People know what we're talking about. Creating a WebDirect page, customize it for the Android phone. Is it possible to use that page inside of an Android app? I'm reading some in the web about WebView for Android.
Yeah, and that was directed at me. Unfortunately, I'm number one, not a WebDirect expert. Number two, even though I develop apps for Android, I don't fine tune them for what Android is good at versus not good at. I just need my FileMaker solution to work on it. So with all of that, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that question for. I would have to do a lot of research to find out. Not sure.
Is it possible to use that page inside an Android app?
I mean, my gut reaction is, yeah, of course you can. Oh, that's what a WebViewer is designed for.
But it may ask you for your FileMaker username and password to get into it, right? So,
oh yeah,
I mean, you open it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, that link that he's provided right there is Android developers documentation. So that's going to get you information on the WebView library and what you can do with it. But again, you're going to have to do a lot of development around it to make that WebView do what you want within the app. So yes, I mean, if that was as simple of a question, a lot more simple than I was assuming that it was, then yes, you certainly could. And this would be the way. But this documentation you're looking at is specifically for native Android development.
Yeah, I mean, this gets back to the React Native, because essentially that's what you were building over that course that week, was a native application, either on iOS or on Android, and it would talk to the FileMaker server through the data API, DAPI, to get data out of it. So
right,
you're bypassing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but everything that we did inside that app that needed to be viewed on a web browser, we used linking to actually open up the Android web browser and display it there, not within the mobile app itself. So two different ways to do maybe the same thing, right?
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. My only point was that because you're using a data API, highly robust, highly reliable mechanism WebDirect tries to pretend it's FileMaker Go or FileMaker Pro as
Right.
best it can within the limits of a browser, and you're always running into these little, roadblocks, right? And that's whenever people come to me and they say, "Hey, I want this big project. I want you to build it in WebDirect," and I always get nervous because you could run into a snag in there, and people get burned by this. I've been burned by it, so I don't, go down this road anymore. But I don't make giant promises on WebDirect because just because it works on Pro or Go doesn't mean it'll work on WebDirect the way you expect it to, or at all. And so you got to be very, very careful with that, with setting
For
customers' expectations. What
for
WebDirect
quite a few years, it doesn't happen quite so much anymore, but quite a few years when mobile app development was still fairly new, there was a lot of people that cheated. And what they would do is they would create a native iPhone or a native Android app. And all it was a web browser with their look and feel. So their app name, their app icon, you launch it, it's got a splash screen for them, but then really all it is a big giant web browser, and then they just simply plop their web app in there that had been designed for the web. So you could immediately take that straight to your WebDirect URL, have them log in, and so you could do that today with exactly what you have here on the screen as far as the rules, as far as how that web viewer would work, settings that you could have to make it look and feel like what you want. Yeah.
My only concern is the credentials you have to put on WebDirect, right? Now you were doing a lot of advanced JavaScript, this and that and the other thing. Could you tell the page to submit the credentials for you? I'm imagining you probably could you go back to JSON and kind of inject stuff into that page, right?
So you're talking about auto enter of WebDirect credentials?
Yeah, like going because you were doing some really interesting JSON hacks with you'd take a load of page, then run a routine that would swap out and do things on the JSON, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have it able to auto enter the credentials for you. I think that's something you could do, right? I don't know if it
Well, it depends on if you can figure out how FileMaker is accepting that on that page. Is it a post? It would be interesting to look when you hit submit after typing in your credentials on WebDirect. When you hit submit, what's the web communication traffic going on secretly under the hood, right? Is that just a generic HTTP post? If so, you could write that in code.
Yeah, write it in there, and then your own little front end would submit the username password transparently, so people don't get exposed to that, right?
Right.
Never mind the licensing issues with this.
No, you still have a WebDirect connection right there. So you would still but your server would limit who can connect and how many concurrent connections you have based upon how much licensing you have.
Public facing. Yeah, I guess you could do concurrency. They really hate public facing WebDirect things a lot. I mean, but it's one of those things with Claris. If you write them a check for $50,000 or $100,000 or something, they'll let you do whatever you want. For the most part. So they are amenable to your needs. But what they don't like is people who give them $500 and then they roll out an app for 5,000 people.
Now, everything we just talked about is probably much cheaper and easier to do in Claris Studio.
Since we're talking WebDirect, if anything is done on the server in WebDirect, not on the client, why would you need to use PSauce? Yeah, there's kind of an overlap with that. There's not a lot with that. If you have WebDirect and you're in the interface, this is for Lynn from Austin, and you press a button on the interface and it's going to run a script. The script doesn't run on your client because your client's a browser and it's dumb. It's going to run on the server. So there's not a lot of difference. You could split threads and use different. It's very advanced, but from your perspective, you don't need PSauce for that. Technically, I think PSauce is a different thread. So you could have one process running in PSauce and then WebDirect script running, and so you could have two scripts running in parallel. If that helps you at all, I don't know that it does. That's a Jacob Taylor kind of conversation. We'll bring him in and talk about that. As the Claris Studio platform actually kind of goes where it needs to go, eventually it'll get backed up. There'll be a recovery plan if it blows up. It will be robust. You won't have to worry about telling your customers no. One of the biggest problems when you deal with platforms like Airtable, frankly, or something lightweight like Claris Studio, is that you're going to have to tell your customers no because they come to you, or WebDirect in a lot of cases. They're going to come to you. It's like if someone comes to you with JavaScript, You're never going to have to tell them no. The only question is, do they have enough money? It can be done. There's no technical limitations ever with that, but it will cost money, dollars, and stuff like that. So people, want it, low cost. So then they get into WebDirect, but then it has limitations. And then they get into Claris Studio or Airtable and it has extremely large limitations to what it won't do. And so it's a tricky conversation to have. Once again, I don't like having to apologize to customers because we encourage them to use some tech, and then I have to find out it won't get to where they really want to go at the end of the day. And since I am 33 years of doing this, I don't like to look stupid. I shy away from things that get me in trouble. So,
but I would say you could probably protect your CYA by just stating Claris Studio is currently in beta. It's not ready for full release. They're still adding more content. They're still changing. But we as developers have access to that in beta. They've never given us that before. So I appreciate the fact that they have, but it's not customer ready yet because it's still in beta.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Awesome stuff. So Leland, your next engagement is going to be JSON kind of for beginners. Is that the topic that we're going to be doing there?
On Thursday, yes. And it was interesting today with one of I call him an intern. We have several people in IT, and Mervin is my tier 1 support person that frees me up from, is it plugged in? My printer doesn't work. I need a new screen. My mouse broke. All that tier 1 support. He's fantastic but he's kind of getting his developer chops, drinking from a fire hose, learning how to do a little development in FileMaker. So him and I get together once in a while, and today's topic was JSON. So I actually helped him walk through what he was trying to accomplish. He wanted a JSON payload to be passed between scripts as parameters. And so he had a few wires crossed that weren't quite what they needed to be. So I stepped back and gave him a step-by-step what JSON looks like, what the syntax rules are. Yeah, so that was a good prelude to what I'm going to cover on Thursday.
Have a good weekend. Glad you're working with the FileMaker platform. It kicks ass. I personally use it. I only endorse the things I use. So if I like it, I like Bell helicopters, I like Toyota cars, and I like FileMaker. There you go. And I like Leland. I love Leland. Leland's so wonderful.
and now we love JavaScript. Yeah.
Now we love JavaScript too. I actually see the power of it. I got to find a way to build a basic project where I have to actually force me to build it away from the TV show, and then I can be like really awesome. Force you to practice the coding. That was the problem with doing this stuff, is that you got to sit and practice it. Must practice. Cool. All right, everyone. See you Monday.
Sure, yeah.
Got a report of an individual up here who may be a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look at the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.